Dr. Jazz.
David, you mentioned the cookers also now.
Jazz.
You know, how did you end up in that group, by the way? I mean, I have the records, and I love the group, and I think you or Donald is the youngest, probably, right? But like, how did you end up in
I'm
that
the
band? Yeah,
I'm
you're
the
and playing with those guys. I mean, that must be a
I want
thrill.
that credit more than almost anything. Um, so the cookers, it's a long story, but
Oh,
since
please, come
that's what
on.
this is
That's
about.
why we're here.
So there was a small club in Brooklyn here in New York, called the Up Over Jazz Cafe. And the owner of the club, the first concert he ever went to in his life as a little boy was a Night of the Cookers concert. So he knew he knew I was working with Freddie Hubbard at the time. So every year, I know this part I didn't know. The actual Night of the Cookers concert was like April 6th or so. It was right around Freddie's birthday. So he tried to have this Night of the Cookers / Freddie Hubbard birthday celebration every year, but it was not a big club. It only fit like maybe 100 people, 70 to 100, something like that. It wasn't a big club, and Freddie Hubbard lived in Los Angeles. You'd have to fly him in, you'd have to put him in a hotel. It was really beyond the guy's means, but every year he tried to make something happen. And because I work with Freddie, he would talk to Freddie, but he'd also help, ask me like, well, tell me with the flight, take, like all the coordination stuff. And one year I remember the guy here in my home. I don't know if you know Los Angeles. Let's see how we calculate it. So if Los Angeles is here, Freddie lived a little north, in what they call the Valley.
Hmm.
And back then, there was a new airline called JetBlue that flew south to Long Beach. And this guy bought Freddie a ticket out of Long Beach, even though I told him, like, you don't understand LA, to do this can be 2 hours sometimes in traffic. You can't buy him a ticket there. You just don't do it. But people don't, that's what I've learned about promoters sometimes. They don't listen. So he bought Freddie a ticket to out of Long Beach to come to New York. And the guy came to my house, like, call him up. I can't reach him. I can't call him up. Like, what's up, Freddie? He's like, I told him I'm not going to Long Beach. I'm not going to go to Long Beach, But anyway, something like this happened every year, like 3 or 4 years in a row. And finally one year, he's like, okay, I give up on Freddie. And Freddie actually did come once. And I think it was like Larry Ridley had a band or something. But this year he's like, okay, I give up. But I want to do a Night of the Cookers celebration. Can you get as many of the guys who were on the Night of the Cookers recording and do a weekend at the club? And so I got James Spaulding and Pete LaRocca. And then I guess Larry Ridley heard about it, and he called Freddie, like, this guy's doing a Night of the Cookers thing, and he didn't call me up. And Freddie called me up, you got to use him. And so we got Larry, and then Larry got another trumpet player. And I called the club owner, like, hey, man, and he said, no, it's Night of the Cookers, 2 trumpets, So we did the gig, and it was a lot of fun. If I remember right, Harold Mayburn never wanted to do it. They asked him every year, and he'd say no. But we had LaRocca and Spaulding, and Spaulding was more associated with Freddie's band, so we decided, like, let's make it more. We'll keep it Night of the Cookers, but we'll keep, like, the band itself will be more Freddie Hubbard alumni. So we got Ronnie Matthews and Kiani Zawadi, guy on Ready for Freddie and that stuff. And I think Craig Handy did it. and then the two trumpets, me and Jimmy Owens.
Mm. Yeah.
And it was a fun gig, and it went well. But the thing that really struck me was how good Pete LaRocca and James Spaulding sounded. They were incredible. They would play the Night of the Cookers record on the breaks at the club and everything. Oh yeah, and it was, for better or worse, you know, we heard all those guys in the 60s, right? We have all the records and we heard it. And, with some guys like Freddie, Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, they all went in a lot of different directions.
Mm.
Pete LaRocca and James Spaulding didn't do that.
Yeah.
They didn't go in a million different directions. They didn't go into fusion. They didn't do this. It basically stayed them. But what I don't know, the world, the press, whatever you want to call it, they don't hear the subtlety of a guy like the refinement of a guy like that, how he sounded in the 60s and how he sounded then in the 2000s. Like, how much more, that there's still change, there's still improvement or refinement or whatever you are. And they were great. And we were talking on the breaks and everybody was having a good time. And I said, well, fuck, let's do more of this. So, got a few, we started doing a few more gigs. We did a festival here and there. We did a few clubs, and it was built around LaRocca and Spaulding. And at a certain point back then, I also started working with Charles Tolliver, and bringing back his big band.
Yeah.
I basically called Charles. I mean, I don't know, it was a slow day. I didn't have anything to do. I'm like, what can I do to, like, I don't know, ruin my life, make my life more challenging, let's say. Musically, you look for challenges. It can't always be your thing. So I called up Charles Tolliver, who I had met with Freddie Hubbard within the last year or two, and I said, look, if I can get you your big band a gig, would you want to do it? And he said, yeah. And so we started doing the Charles Tolliver big band. There are places that wanted us but couldn't afford a big band. So, and also, as good as the LaRocca Spaulding Night of the Cookers celebration was, we were playing Lee Morgan and Freddie Hubbard music, which is great, of course, but that's not how a band evolves. That's how you have a lot of fun playing. It could be a great experience, and it was. Playing with Pete LaRocca was great. I was too young for it. I wish I had another 10 years to be the guy I could be now to play with Pete LaRocca. But it was an important experience. But at a certain point, in my head at least, I was like, we should start playing original music. Now, I met Billy Harper and Charles Tolliver band. And I was like, okay, well, we bring Billy Harper and Charles Tolliver into the Night of the Cookers thing and play their music. Now we have original music. Now we have a place to grow. Plus, Billy Harper and Charles Tolliver. So I think in the end, we did one gig with that. And the one thing you don't know when you do that stuff is, like, who's mad at somebody from 30 years ago or something like that. It won't. So Pete LaRocca was pissed at somebody. So in the end, we did one gig at this club called the Jazz Stand in New York, where it was Spaulding, Harper, Tolliver, and me in the front line. And that's when I think I first brought Cecil McBee in, because Cecil McBee was also in the Tolliver big band. But it wasn't Billy Hart yet. Was it George? Yeah, I think it was George Cables. George Cables has been doing the Night of the Cookers gigs. The last bunch we did was George Cables. He didn't do the original gig. That was Ronnie Matthews.
Yeah.
But then George started doing a lot of gigs. So we did the Jazz Standard. Charles was like, the big band. The big band got signed to Blue Note. We were making a record. Charles was like, got to focus on that. Spaulding stayed around for a while. But we started doing the Harper Tolliver music, and then Tolliver left, and I think we had Cecil McBee was in there, and Cables was in there. We started doing their music. Spaulding didn't want to do something or something. He didn't. Spalding didn't like to play some of Harper's music. And then he was supposed to go somewhere and didn't go, and I got Craig Handy.
Mm.
And then we had it's a jazz festival in California called the Healdsburg Jazz Festival. And this is 2007. I remember it because we're going back this year for our 17th anniversary. At Healdsburg. And she's the woman who booked that festival. It's a great festival, by the way. She worked at the Keystone Corner, and there was people she was close friends with, and she always wanted to bring them back to the festival, but wanted to bring them back in different kind of things. And then she heard, oh, the Cookers, it's got Craig Handy, who's from the Bay Area. It had George Cables, and we had been trying to get Billy Hart, and Billy Hart was one of the ones that came to Healdsburg all the time. So that was the first gig we did the Healdsburg Jazz Festival in June of 2007. Billy Hart was on the gig. Now we're playing Billy Harper music and Cecil McBee music and George Cable's music. And we did the first gig and we're just like, here, and it clicked. Everything clicked. And I was like, all right, let's do it. So it took a minute to figure that out. I mean, as long as that story was. But that's how it came about. Back then when I used to talk about it, I used to talk about like, building a championship a basketball team.
Yeah, that's how it sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah, you need the right point guard. Like maybe this point guard was a better player to everybody, but this guy fit the thing, and that kind of. So it really clicked, and that was 2007, and except for bringing Donald Harrison in, it's been the same band.
Yeah. Wow.
And here we are, 17 years later.
Still doing it.
Everybody's still, they're all
amazing.
It's been great.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, yeah, it's amazing that all those guys are still playing it, right? And at such a high level. It's incredible. I mean,
yeah,
Cecil and Billy, and it's like incredible.
Yeah, Cecil's going to be 89 next month. Well, shit, a couple of weeks now. He's going to be 89.
Amazing.
It takes a special kind of musician. You need somebody who's always still trying to grow, still trying to to improve, still approaching this music in a fresh way. They don't, nobody's pat. It's a journey every night.
Yeah.
And that's important. That's when, it's a thing. I don't like to talk gone, the old days, but there's a lot of things they bring to the table that doesn't really happen anymore. And it's important to me. It's important for me to be around it. But I mean, clearly there's a work ethic that comes from being around the best, I mean, they're amongst the best too. But they were around Sonny Rollins, and they were around all those guys, and they grew up in that world where you couldn't. I mean, I used to talk to Freddie Hubbard about that. I mean, Freddie was obviously a unique guy too, but I mean, he talked about how driven he was because he came to New York. He thought he was pretty good. He had practiced hard and whatever, but he came to New York, and he still tells me of the first jam session he went to. He went like eager kid to go sit in somewhere, and they were like, go sit in the corner, kid, and then Lee Morgan, and I mean all the people that were around him. He was so driven by how good everybody was around him. That I don't. If you come up with that era, there's nothing else you can do but see where the bar is raised and try to get there yourself. I mean, if you want to play. So they came up in that world, and they still approach things that way. They still approach it, and again, it's a certain approach to the music. I mean, this is sort of an indication of today. Like, okay, we got a lot of great musicians coming up now. Maybe they go to schools, they learn, they have all this information at their fingertips. I mean, I was talking to somebody recently, and they were like, remember, when we would hear about these records, but there was no way to get them sometimes.
Yeah.
It took a search to find like what was it, Joe Henderson, like an out of print Joe Henderson record. A friend had it. You got a cassette,
Yep.
we didn't have all this stuff at our fingertips. So there's always this search to not only just try to get better, but just to find the music you want to learn from.
Yep.
Now everybody has everything at their fingertips. And this is actually, you know what, this is something I talked to Freddie Hubbard years ago when we were talking about doing like a method book, and I was like, he would talk about, I had an Arbenz book, and looked in the Arbenz book, practiced the thing his teacher told him to practice, and then he would try to like create his own variations. He got bored, okay, like okay, he would create his own variations of all of them, just to keep practicing 10 hours a day like he used to. I was like, and he said, when we were with Blake Ayers and we were trying something new every day, we were always trying things, always trying things. And I was like, one of the problems that's hard to break out of these days is everything you did is now the law. Somebody's going to transcribe your solo on whatever. Take D minor mint. They're going to transcribe your solo on D minor mint. You're going to play this over D minor, and they're going to transcribe and go, okay, that's what we're supposed to play over D minor.
Yeah.
Everything becomes kind of a rule, and it's like putting it all like in a box. So like everything is a rule now. I mean, it's a great rule. You're learning Freddie Hubbard things, but okay, this lick he played on D minor, that goes over D minor. Okay, D minor, you play a gig, D minor comes up. Oh, my Freddie Hubbard lick, and it seems like more the ending than the start.
Yeah.
Yep. Like I figured this thing out. I could play over this thing. Freddie would be like, okay, that's great today. What are you going to do tomorrow? And there's a lot of that, what those guys call the starting point, that everybody's now like, not the ending point really, but just like, okay, I've learned what I need to learn over this. Like, it's a rule now, it's pat now, this is what I do. And I take that box of things I learned and throw, and you can certainly develop a concept out of that. But, how do you grow out of that, especially when you're playing chord changes? Like how are you figuring your way out of it, and how much of that is you and how much of that is the guys you're learning from? Those guys, they learn from everybody too. But I mean, look, I have a tape of Freddie Hubbard when he was still in Indianapolis, and it's Spalding. Excuse me. It was Spalding and Ridley, and they had a little band in Indianapolis, and they played like Tad's Delight, and I mean, they were playing the tunes of the day, the Miles Davis Quintet, and Clifford Brown and Max Roach. Freddie sounded note for note Clifford Brown at 17.
Interesting.
Like same articulations, everything. And the other irony was, after like 4 or 5 tunes, he started getting a little tired. You could see his chops going down a little bit. But the articulation was note for note Clifford Brown. 2 years later, that's completely gone. Like completely gone. I mean, Lee Morgan in his first couple of records had a lot of Clifford Brown. A couple of records later, completely gone. As they found their own voice and their own phrasing, or tried to expand the vocabulary they had. I mean, it can start as a pretty pat vocabulary, but then and that's the point, and that's the thing about the Cookers. They might have routines, they might have things you recognize every day, but they're all departure points. The band knows it, especially, well, the rhythm section knows it. So if George does a certain thing, Billy knows that thing, and it's like, okay, tonight I'll give him that, but no, tonight I'm going to fuck with that and take it here and see what happens. And they know each other enough to get back, And that's another thing they taught me, and Billy Hart especially.
Hmm.
It's not that you fuck up, it's how you recover.
Yep.
So, if you're experimenting, if you're trying shit, you can't be afraid of falling on your face, even if the falling on your face still sounds better than most things, but it's how you recover. How, the point is to get out of it and get on with it. Okay, oops, but, you know, so that approach is the thing. So
Yep.
when I look at young musicians today, I can see there's guys who are trying to experiment all the time, and there's guys who are very pat in what they do.
Yeah.
And maybe the guys that are pat lean more towards a straight ahead thing, and the guys who are more experimental maybe lean more towards an avant-garde thing. But most of the great music we've done has lived in the middle. You know, there's things like Blue Note. I mean, Blue Note records are Blue Note records for a reason. It's groundbreaking music,
Yeah.
but you know what? You can still go. It's still, so it's like taking accessible music and pushing the boundaries as much as you can, or that's sort of what seems to be the formula that this all started with, and that's what those guys do. They're
Yeah.
aware of, and not be accessible per se, but they're aware of melody and harmony.
Yeah.
So these days, what do you do? So we got this, and you got this, and you want this. Do you take these guys and hope you put them in a situation that expands that vocabulary? They get more daring, they get more experiment. Or you take this guy who might not have the vocabulary to get here, but it has the open mindedness or experimentation or whatever to try it. So it's
Yeah.
neither works. Well, rarely works, let's say. And that's, I don't know, that's the world we live in now,
Yeah.
as I try to do to find the people, because again, you don't want that pat thing. You want that knowledge. You want that, you want them to have all that knowledge of what happened, because that's a starting point. There's a lot of great musicians out here who have stayed here and have
Hmm.
made the same type of record for 20 years. And apparently there's a fan base for it, because I've talked to those labels like, look, I mean, it's
Yeah.
rooted here, but it's not here. If it's here, you're kind of like uncomfortable. I mean, I guess this is not too personal. But the Cookers live in that world too. So we did a record for Smoke once, and
Yeah.
Smoke's thing is pretty, but it's very, it's a consistent thing, and it's good. And some of them are, kind of, but we were doing a tune that was a little more, adventurous, whatever. And the guy who owned the label, he was in the studio with us. He was uncomfortable.
Hmm.
I could see
Sure.
him
Sure.
visibly
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
Sure.
And I said, you know what? Let me tell you something. Let me try to say something. That uncomfortable feeling you're feeling is what separates this band from all the rest of the bands.
Hmm.
That's the thing. A little bit of like, you know, you might feel uncomfortable, but other people might look at that as something else or might feel something else. But it's not just this all the time. That little thing you're feeling, that's what separates this. And that's what separates your record from the rest of those records.
Hmm.
And, you know, historically, those are the records, that have life to them,
Exactly. Yeah.
because the other records that you feel great the whole time because it's just, you know, and it's good. It swings, it's a melody. I mean, it's all good, but it does never
Yeah. Yeah.
strays. That's almost like a machine. You keep pumping them out, get on the radio, get on streaming, next, and they're all good. I'm not trying to denigrate any of them. They're all strong records. But if we're doing this for the ages, which is what the best of this music has always been. Who decides that? That might be a different thing now. You need that little, that's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
that uncomfortable is. It's a good, it should be a good uncomfortable, and you're just uncomfortable, you know. And he kind of heard me and was like, no, it still makes me uncomfortable, so but
Yeah,
what
but
can you do? But I've digressed. Now, that's the world we kind of live in today.
yeah.
There's a lot of good music, but it's, I don't know, confused.
No, but
Well,
I hear you. I
confused.
mean, yeah, it's what the Dolphy Records
Uh,
had, and the Miles Quintet, and it had that always something was like,
yeah.
damn, what is that? It's so yeah,
And that's the okay, maybe it's arrogant to say like, okay, 20 years from now, somebody will be with a Cookers record, like, oh, well, okay. But look, I mean, the Miles Davis Quintet with Herbie, Ron, and Tony, apparently that was the worst selling period of his life. Those records didn't sell like the other records,
yeah. But it's like,
but
yeah,
and it made him go electric, but it's the most, I don't know, to some people it's the most important
yeah,
thing that ever happened,
yeah.
or the second most. Charlie Parker counts or
For
something.
instance, yeah,
I mean, and as I said, nobody's trying to do that. Nobody, and I mean, that's another thing I guess that happens in the world today. Nobody's should be trying to innovate. It should just happen.
yeah, yeah,
You create a situation and you get in a situation, and because of the group you have, the material you're trying to do is, but most importantly, the approach you have to it, that's what supposedly is going to make it happen. And it's a natural thing. It's not like, oh, I want to innovate today,
yeah.
and it's an approach. And if I've learned anything about the Cookers, and we're talking about the Cookers, it's that approach. That approach hasn't changed. Like I said, I mean, at this point, 17 years in, I know pretty much everything these guys can do, and they still do more. I, maybe not as much now, but there was a time, being younger, being less experienced, not not being in that shit, where I was, and I always liked this because I started music late, and I always felt I was behind the eight ball. I always felt I had catching up to do. I had to work harder to get to the level everybody else in school was, or this, and I guess I got comfortable with that. So I just kept looking for the next level of getting my ass kicked.
Yeah.
So there was times, maybe 5 years into the Cookers, something like that, where I'd have a pretty good night. And I'd be like, okay, hey, I belong here. I can hang with these guys. And then Billy Harper would be like, oh, I'm like, oh, okay, never mind. They still had more gears, So even if I thought I got close to one, they were like, oh no, dude, here, they show me something else and it'd be all over. But again, okay, I'll strive to get to that one. Okay, I kind of did it. And Billy Harper would, oh, okay, maybe not, and some people would hate that feeling.
Yeah, but
I've
it's
either
the
gotten
best.
used to it or just, yeah.
The best way to
I
learn.
mean,
That's like a university, every gig,
yeah, I mean, there are band leaders who don't want sidemen that are potentially better than them, for want of a better word. You know, they want to be like the guy.
Yeah.
On stage, it's my band, it's my thing. And I'm sure that's good too. But it's and these guys were all that. I mean, look at who George Cables has played with. Fuck, man, it's
Sure.
Dexter Gordon, Sonny Rollins.
Yeah, everyone. Yeah.
And I mean, he was able to take a different perspective on it. He always looked at it like, my job is to accompany these people and make them sound the best they can. And I tell young pianists this, which falls on deaf ears a lot in college these days. I'm glad you can solo well. That's important. But until you learn how to accompany you know, other musicians, you're not going to be the most popular guy on earth, unless you're going to be, you know, like a big star or something and want to play piano trio for the rest of your life. You know, that other part, comping is going to be what makes you important to the best people out here. You know, create a color. Listen to Herbie Hancock. Before Herbie Hancock was Herbie Hancock made everybody sound
great. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. That's such an important advice. Yeah. I agree. Definitely.
See if it works. And George, I know George, I mean, who used to teach at the New School a lot, where a lot of people came through. That was his assessment. Like, oh yeah, so and so was in your Herbie. You know, he had a Herbie Hancock class, ironically, that I used to substitute teaching sometimes. And you know, somebody who wound up on Blue Note Records or something 5 years later came through his Herbie Hancock class, and you know, I was like, so he's pretty good, huh? I said, yeah, he was, but he didn't comp very well. I was like, oops. I mean, again, that's how he, you know, looked at him too. Like, you know,
yeah, his perspective.
And maybe now, you know, kids on Blue Note doesn't have to comp. You know, who knows? Who knows? Yeah. Okay, so that was the first, right?
Yeah. No, you were speaking about band leading, and I wanted to jump in there. I mean, I listened today to Breathing Room, which I have on CD, the fresh sound one, and the last one by you is
first
Wake Up.
One.
Wake Up Call.
Listen to.
And like, what's
Wake Up Call? That's, yeah.
What happened from Wake Up Call
that's
to
just
now?
a different band.
Yeah, but
that's
like,
just oh no, that's my last record. Wake Up Call is the last record I released.
Yeah. Have you been leading some?
I finished another one.
Or... Oh yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you. What's happening there on the band leading front?
Sextet. I made another sextet record. And ironically, I'll never know what happened, but I made the sextet record for a specific label. One of these straight ahead labels, the ones I described, because I guess I can describe it with more I don't know, inner knowledge, I guess. And I don't think it's a musical decision on his part. But he's looking at streaming, he's looking at radio, and he didn't think you know, he was looking for something much more commercial with shorter tunes and something like that. And I always thought with previous labels who had that sense, you know, we do function in that world, that you give them a few like that, a couple of shorter tunes, a couple of, and then you get to your thing. I mean, they're all your thing, but
yeah, sure, I know
it's balanced. And the guy didn't release the record, so I had to take it to another label. So it's been delayed. It was recorded at the beginning of last year. It's the sextet. I don't know. Everybody has a different opinion about everything, and everybody, you know, when they talk to me about stuff, has a different opinion. Breathing Room is not the record to listen to compare to Wake Up Call.
Sure, no, it's different. Yeah.
It's 24 years ago. No, but I made 3 records with that band. Do you know? Shit, what did it? Mirror.
Yeah,
Mirror
yeah, of course. I mean, I have that stuff, man.
Yeah.
I know your stuff. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Yeah.
It doesn't scare me with Breathing Room.
No.
It's an interesting thing. Well, I mean, I guess it's not that. I mean, rarely is it somebody's first record the one that. I mean, maybe they get a lot of hype coming out of the gate. But is it their best record? Because I can sit here like this about every record except my first records.
How come?
I can say like, look, because they were a good start, man. They were a good start, but they're not. It seemed like at that time, I'm talking about like how I felt like 20 years ago. It seemed like that and the octet, the new jazz composers octet. Yeah. The first records are okay. I mean, they certainly kind of have like, okay, here it is. This is what it is. I mean, it's not conceptually. It's not. I don't know how to put it. Conceptually, the bands had, were establishing a sound, like a kind of sound, but it just wasn't there. And the second ones, to me at least, in my mind at the time, really clicked.
Mm,
Like, just had
mm.
to make the first record to kind of get get to the next one and the next one. I mean, they're there. If I could, I don't know if this is true or not, really. If I could, I would just disappear those records.
Oh, come
You
on.
know?
I love the writing. The writing is beautiful, man, on the first on Breathing Room. I mean,
Yeah,
you wrote some great
yeah,
themes
yeah.
there. I don't know. It's
Well, okay, let's look at it this way. And you know, so you take an American television show, right? Like a good one, like one out of every 2 million
yeah,
are good, right? What's it called? Seinfeld.
yeah, okay.
One that actually is funny. That actually, I could probably think of an older one, but Seinfeld is a good analogy to me. Okay, so the first episodes are funny. You laugh at them, whatever.
But
But
yeah,
the
exactly. Yep.
second and third year, when they're all together, you know, and just, you know,
Yep.
but the writing on the first couple are great because that's your idea stewing for 10 years, right? I mean, your first record is everything that happened those first 20 something years.
True.
And then the next record after that is 2 years later. So like as one thing is like everything, and maybe the band thing is just starting to gel. The band starts to gel and gel and gel. If you stick with basically the same guys, the band gets better and better. The material might still be as good, but maybe, some of those first ideas you had, you can't.
Yeah.
The Those first fresh ideas, you couldn't execute them yet like you could. So the same thing with the sitcom, like 2 or 3 years now they're an ensemble thing. They're humming, they're
True.
tatting off each other, very knows each other, and that's what seems to happen on the second record. Like that's how much time it took. So it took to get to that point as a band. Like and even with the
Yeah.
Cookers, the Cookers are great, but you know what? It's 17 years now. Fuck, man. It's there's something really, I mean, in my head at least, there's really something to be said for that aspect of the music. Get the like-minded people who hopefully
Yeah.
like you enough to stick around and see what develops. Like the sextet, I mean, some of these bands have been around for a long time. And I mean, in a normal world, if I was, I don't know, more popular or whatever, all of that could have happened in 5 years. We could have put the band together. Somebody would have been like, "Oh wow, this band. Okay, give them a bunch of gigs, put them on every festival, tour the world, and
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
2 years, you're a band already." And then you knock out 3 records, 4 records in 5 years, and then in 5 years, you've done 100 gigs, 200 gigs, and you're tight, and you got everything. And then you go like, "Okay, that was cool. Next one." With
Yeah.
me, what it's taken me 20 years to get to that, you know. And the record I just did is actually the first record with new personnel. Um, but it was always the same guys. The Breathing Room, Marcus Strickland and EJ Strickland were
Yeah.
still in college. I found them in college. They were 20 years old. And who else was there? Dwayne Burno and
Yeah.
Xavier Davis were also in the octet because that's how many musicians that I thought can do that thing. It wasn't a big field of people I can pull from. I had a pretty specific idea of who could pull this music
Play the
off,
music. Yeah.
and it was always those guys. Craig Handy's on Breathing Room, and then
Yeah.
Myron comes in on the next couple of records. Myron was in the octet too, so I mean, it's a lot of the same guys over a lot of years now. But we were all kids then. When I put the octet together, everybody was on the 30, and more importantly, everybody was single.
That's important,
Nobody
actually.
had
Yeah.
kids, nobody was married.
Sure, man. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now looking back, yeah. Um, And for a lot of them, who else? So the octet, no, I think maybe one guy had gotten married, but nobody had kids. Everybody, I was the oldest guy in 1996. I was 32, and everybody else was like be like between 22 and 26 or 27. Everybody was babies, and we got together every week, and guys wrote and bought stuff in. We were reading new music almost every week. Everybody had the time to do that, you know, and that that made a difference. But even again, but the first record is great because it's some of those guys' best writing. Because it was the first thing they bought in. It was the first thing when you said, "Okay, five horns, what can you do?"
Yeah.
They came in, you know, and that was great. You know, I don't think I ever felt smarter. You know, putting that band together, like I said, getting together almost every week, and then seeing what these guys bought in. Like the first time you sat there and read the guy's tune, and you're just like, "Oh, fuck, man, wow," you know. And like I said, I never felt smarter. Like, wow, you know, these guys, man, are they delivering, you know? And that it didn't work in the world per se, you know, is another thing. But you know, we still, and that's the other thing, you know, that has changed over time. And they have it a little bit too. I got to give them credit for sticking in there. People want to see results.
Yeah.
Band leaders want to see results. I mean, I don't know. I think maybe I'm special that way, or my ego is worse than other people. But I take a lot of pride in the records. Outside of the first one, I take a lot. Like I said, I take a lot of pride in the record. You set out to do something, and it happened. You know, and that means a lot to me. Those guys, you know, for better or worse, it doesn't matter. And I think this is how you move on and keep moving. Those guys, they did the record. Some of them want to check it out. Some of them aren't interested. They know they did it. They know it was cool, and you know they move on. And I think that's how they move forward. But if you're not you know, if you're reading about all your other friends in magazines and everybody else is getting signed to a record label, or everybody's doing this or everybody's doing that, they don't look at it as like a success. And I was like, well, the success is the record. We made the record, you know. And so it's not embraced in this world. But I mean, it's something that people can't help but you know, I don't know about judge, but they can't help but notice.
Yeah.
And if you throw something out in the world and it's not like embraced like you thought it might be embraced when you were making the record, like, you know, I've seen it a couple of times. I don't know if maybe it's a couple of times with my records, but I've been on other records where it's clear something's happening, you know.
Yeah.
Like I remember a record, Rodney Kendrick. You knew Rodney Kendrick, piano
Yeah,
player.
sure. The piano
He
player.
was on French Polygram in the 90s. Some of the first records. One of not the I didn't work on the first one, but I worked on the second one because he had more originals, and he wasn't much with this. So I'd sit at the piano with him and write out the chart. Um, that record, John Philippe Allard was producing it. He was the first real producer I worked with. At some point during the first or second day of recording, John Philippe would go over to him and kiss him because it was like, fuck, it's happening. You can tell something was everything was clicking, it was working. You knew it. I mean, you know, music at a certain point is like, oh fuck, okay, you know, like, and you know, I do that now when I do this producing of these live records and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, there's two things you can look for. You can, well, A, you got to find a fucking tape. B,
Yep.
you got to hope it's, you know, pretty well recorded or whatever. But C, once you start listening to it, I mean, we do this already with the stuff we already know existing. Like we have a million versions of Miles Davis, right? We have a million, you know, we have all their concerts. We've heard like the best bands every night. And you know, there's some nights that are just like, oh fuck, man.
Yep.
Billy Hart, besides being everything Billy Hart is a real John Coltrane scholar. And he could point to like specific tunes where they go somewhere they never went before. He'll be like, no, go to this. Okay, put that. I want to talk about you. Put that one on. You know, and they start playing in Coltrane's ridiculous. And I was like, see, they got to something that night. They got to something in that minute that they never got to before. You know, so I mean, I don't know if there's a consensus about that magic, but you got to think, you know, in that moment when it's happening. And that's the thing. I mean, not well, I'll go back to the tapes. With the tapes, it's a great band, but you're looking for that magic, because if they're playing every night and they have that approach, and that goes back to the Cookers, if you're approaching the music that way every night, open, experimental, you know, trying things, that, you know, sometimes you fall on your face, but some nights you get that moment, you get that thing, you know, and you know it, you feel it, you know, or you think you do. Sometimes I've had that, like, you know, I know one time the Cookers were playing at Disney's and we had a really good set, and I ran in the back because I knew they record things sometimes. And I said, "Did you record that? Did you record that?" And I'm like, "No." Fuck, man. And then sometimes they have, and I listen to it back and okay, that's okay, you know. But that's the thing, and that's the ongoing tradition of this. If you're going for it all the time and you're at that level, and look, the John Coltrane quartet, I mean, how many are you going to go like, well, that one's not that good? But you can tell the difference between like great and like whatever that is, you know. And that particular, I want to talk about you. I mean, you know, you're just like, holy, what the, you know, because and that's what those guys, when, you know, when he's listening, that's what he's looking for, like that one that is just so far beyond anything anybody try. I mean, you know, it's weird to be able to pin that down to like 10-minute ballad, like, you know, and maybe 3 minutes within that ballad. Like they went somewhere within that context that they never went before, and it's just so fucking ridiculous. It's so, you know, but unless you approach music a certain way, that's not going to happen every night, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
So and so playing on Wooding You at a jam set, you know, it's you might get off a couple of, yeah, okay, I got, you know, but it's not that. And I don't think we look at music like that anymore. Maybe that's, you know, if it happened now, it would have to happen in a different way, maybe. I don't know. But I know what did happen. I know what these guys are trying to do, and I'm just gonna keep trying to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, that was the second question, right?
That's
what's question number 3?
What's question
Oh,
number?
How did we get there? We were on breathing.
Yeah, no. I
Okay,
wanted to ask you if there's a new
sorry. I
record
mean, it's
coming
more
out.
fun to talk about that shit. Okay, so Breathing Room. There are a couple of tunes on it I like, and I know, but we were young. I mean, we were young. But the mirror, I thought did it. I liked the mirror. And so then it was When Words Fail. You know, the mirror had a couple of mirrors. I think the first time it had a couple of things like I was like, oh, you know, we pushed it a little bit. When Words Fail was like, I don't know. I thought it was a good collection of tunes. And now this one is the same. So it's the same. It's still E.J. Strickland, and it's still Myron Walden.
Myron, okay, yeah.
Dwayne Burno passed away like a week or two after we did When Words Fail. You know, I remember calling him, and he was hospitalized. He was, you know, he had kidney issues, so he was hospitalized a lot. We didn't think this one was going to be any different than the others. And I remember the person who mixed it was in New Jersey, and it was like an hour drive. And I remember talking to him in the car. You know, he called me up from the hospital, and we talked in the car on the way back. And I think that's the last time I talked to him. but I was at least able to tell them, like, look, it came out, came out well. You should be proud. But that was 10 years ago now. So in essence, this is our fourth record in 20 something years. 24? Can that be possible? The first two records were fast because we were young.
Yeah.
Once you get on something and you're young and you can whatever, and the first record, I had those tunes for a while. Second record, I was still writing a lot, and I think that maybe it was 3 years between the two records, and then it was 9 years between the Mirror and When Words Fail. That was 9 years. I remember that was like all the promo reformed after 9 years. Well, if we had a choice, we would have never stopped. But and now it's 10 years. Oh, it should have been 9 years because it was supposed to come out last year. But okay, so let me see. So Marcus Strickland now teaches in Miami. Now that this is I don't want to call him middle aged. That's nice. How old is middle age? If you're in your 40s, are you middle aged, or that's 50s?
I would say 50s.
Right? Because we don't want to talk. So then what the fuck is 40s? Yeah, that's kind of middle aged, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't know.
Well, let's give everybody a break. Okay, nobody's middle aged, but they're adults now. How about that? They're adults.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a better one. Yeah.
With responsibilities and stuff. So Marcus Strickland is teaching in Miami. Xavier Davis is teaching in Michigan. So they're not around.
Yeah.
And, so Nicole Glover plays tenor saxophone on this one. She's younger, though she's getting a lot of attention now.
Yeah.
And a pianist named David Bryant, who's been doing it for a while. Nicole was actually the only real newer member, though. I don't think that part has changed at all. Whatever band I have, I'm always, not as much as I used. This part is not as much as I used. When I had the octet, going back, the octet, shit, I formed the octet in 1996. That's what, 28 years. Jesus Christ. But when we had all those rehearsals, even though guys weren't very busy, they had to miss, so you had to kind of get a sub list up, and it's hard to believe. That's the one difference between then and now. 1996 is really not that far ago, not that long ago to me. But the school thing had started. The colleges, all the resurgence of jazz and all that started when I was in college. When I was looking for college for jazz or whatever, I think I had there were like 2 or 3 options. By the time I graduated college, there were 50.
Yeah.
It's really, I guess, coming out of Wynton Marsalis and everything, all of a sudden it was a thing. So, but even in the late 90s, with all the young lions coming up and stuff like that, it wasn't like now where everywhere you look, there's 50 of everything.
Yep.
So it was still a chore to find this, make the sub list on every instrument. I'd call them into a rehearsal, you had to check them out, or we had time then. So that's still, with the sextet, it hasn't changed. Guys can't make it. It's hard to, I don't know. I don't want to call it unique. It's nothing unique. It's old. If anything, it's older. You don't want to call a sub for somebody who's been doing it for years and years and knows everything backwards, and just have them walk in. You hope to find, the thing is always with those bands, every band except the Cookers that work a lot. You try to find a way to rehearse enough. You try to find a way to play enough for it to happen. And if you're not famous, but even if there's fame, I know Joe Lovano once made a sextet record or something, but he didn't tour with it. He couldn't afford to tour with it. I'm like,
yeah,
if the top guys are like looking to cut back, you know, then what the fuck, you know?
Yeah.
And I always had this feeling, and it in some ways it kind of hurt me maybe, but I don't care. I'm not smart sometimes. I never wanted to go from town to town as a single playing tunes with a local rhythm section.
No, yeah, come on. That yeah.
But it's still people's bread and butter. People still do it, you know. And I never wanted to do it. I thought, yeah, I don't want to sit here and assess my trumpet player. I'm okay, but I'm not, I'm not a fucking rock star, and I don't want to. Whatever I do, well, this will tie into the new record. Whatever I do, it's an overall concept, and it's the overall concept I'm trying to get across. Like each band, if you heard all the bands, if you heard all my records, I think every band is unique.
Yeah, it's a different story, definitely.
Yeah. And so I don't know if this is like, sometimes it's in my own head. I don't want to ever sound too egotistical, but I'm calling the new record auteur, like, like a filmmaker,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to say, like, that's how I'm trying to approach making these records. Like, I know there was one octet record. It wasn't the intent going away, and I think I chickened out. I said, I want to make a record where, for better or worse, it's me. It's my record, but I'm not going to take one solo on it, and it's still going to sound like my record. Like, how can one do that? And in the end, I wound up playing on one tune, but that was, I mean, it was turning a lot of times with music, you do the thing and then you figure out what you did.
Mm.
I don't, you go in, like, doing the music. Like, when I put the cookers together, I put the cookers together. I didn't go like, oh, I'm giving all these unsung guys like another vehicle or avenue to put their music out here and remind the world, like, excuse me, but Billy Harper, fuck, man. It wasn't the goal. It turned out to be what the thing was. I mean, the goal was always musical. We just did the music. And then you look at the thing, and then you put it out in the world, and you go like, oh, okay. So the reason we did this was, these guys needed so there's a lot of after the fact kind of conceptualizing. Like, when words fail, that was all after the fact. The Mirror, the Russian, the Tarkovsky titles and all that, that was all after the fact. If you look at the music and it says untitled this or untitled that or whatever, but it's the world we live in. So I mean, maybe I think my fear, I guess, because you think about these things, is, who am I to call myself an auteur? Like, Jean-Luc Godard didn't call himself an auteur. He, the press, So I mean, there's that aspect of it, but the point I'm trying to make remains. Like, in this world, I think in this world, if you're an artist that focuses on more straight ahead harmony, rhythm, swing harmony based music. I mean, this is a conversation I used to have with, like, Wallace Roney, who, you look at guys you think are doing much better than you, and should be. He's really good, but when you're sitting, you're crying over a beer or something, it's still the same. It's still the same problem.
Yep.
What Wallace used to always talk about was, it's like, the sophisticated swing and harmony guys never get a break out here. The stuff you call more experimental sounds the same to all the press that is blowing up the next, like, avant-garde guy. The subtlety of what you do is lost in a general thing. So you're looking to the press to recognize, look what I'm doing with this music.
Mm.
And they're like, oh no, whoever, I don't want to call it, whoever the new Emperor's New Clothes is, or whoever the next hype guy is or whatever like that. And that's what Wallace used to say, like the sophisticated harmony, those guys never get a break. The guys, and my answer was, the thing I came up with is like, people are getting celebrated for their one quirk instead of their all-encompassing knowledge. Like the quirk, that one quirk that makes them like sound different. And I remember it was my first tour. It was my first tour with Freddie Hubbard. So my first time in Europe, and his first time dealing with like the press and things like that.
When was that?
2000. Not that long ago. And we're out with Freddie, and our first gig was at Jazz Vienne. Jazz.
Yeah, sure.
And we did the first gig, and then we had a couple of days off. And there were a bunch of American writers there on a junket. And that's the first time I understood that. Like, why are the writers in business class and we're in coach? Like, wait a second. But they were all there. American writers were there on a junket, and they got taken around to wine country, and so one of the nights like I said, we played our first gig, met all these people and whatever, and then we had 2 or 3 days off before our next gig. So we stayed in Vienna. And when Marcel, the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra, came to town, and we were getting friendly with the writers because we were all the same place every day. So we can't, they made a big deal. They were complaining, they had a big press conference because when all of a sudden the star power thing of everything changed. When Marsalis had like 100 people around at a press conference and all this, and we just came to the gig and talked to some people. So me and a couple of the guys in the band get to the gig a little late. We catch a couple of tunes, and the writers are complaining like, "Oh man, they had to do this, they had to do this." And I was like, "Look, it's a simple answer. If you don't like it, don't do it. If you don't like how it just don't cover it. Oh, we got to cover it." It's like, well, maybe you don't. I don't know. But anyway, we got to talking about the concert, and I asked one of the writers, "Well, like, what do you think?" And he said, "Well, it was pretty pretty typical, pretty much the same, but these." Excuse me, these two musicians seem to distinguish themselves over the others. They sounded more unique than the other guys. They had a more original voice. And then he named the 2 people who I knew, who I knew as like the people, like you would say things like, "Isn't America great? You can get a job, you can get a full-time job and not have any skills." Or whatever dark, sarcastic comment you would make. It's not fair to the musicians or whatever. But I said to him, "Oh, that's interesting. What was it?" And he said something, and I said, there's a difference between different and wrong. And if you can't get that, no wonder, Wallace Roney can't get any love for finding a way to distinguish himself in that music if you're dismissing all of that music,
Yep.
And he wasn't the only one. I mean, we put Mulgrew Miller in that camp too. Mulgrew is definitely the most sophisticated. But as a leader, couldn't get, So, I mean, it was a certain school of things. And as a younger upcoming guy, who looked up to those guys, and they're kind of telling you like, you're fuck kid. You don't even have our name, and you're not getting, and we can't.
Yep.
But it's okay. You can't, just because you recognize something doesn't mean you do anything about it. You just play music. And that's another thing. I mean, I know I'm going all over the place now.
No,
but that's the one thing Freddie Hubbard and Abby Lincoln both told me about that era. It was a simple thing, and I would take it with a grain of salt. And they just said, "I did what I did, and what happened, happened. Came to New York, and I played, and this is what happened." There was no thought of a career trajectory. There was no thought of that. Came to New York, and I played, and what happened, happened. And that's, the most sound advice or whatever, or sound statement. I think, the era they came up with was more conducive for the attention they got. Um, so, and it's still the thing as I watched those guys' frustration. Wallace was a frustrated guy. Um, it was like, oh, but that's it. You found a way. I mean, this. I guess I've read a couple things, heard things. You found a way to continue the tradition of that music, and make it unique, and make it the thing that's still full of life and vitality and passion and energy and all those great things. And they're kind of telling you like
Yeah.
you're no different than Eric Alexander or something. Like somebody who's found a certain thing and does it very well, but has done the same thing.
Yeah.
And what are you going to do? Like, oh, well, I don't know. I think we do it a little differently. Um, and some people will do that, but I mean, that's just a general attitude that, you know, people think that it needs to be a certain type of music these days for it to have a uniqueness to it.
Yeah.
Um, but those same people got my lecture like, there's a difference between different and wrong. And if you can't tell that difference, and somebody's like doing all kinds of wrong, in our opinion, and maybe we have a more educated unit, and that's what you're gonna say, like, look at this. Um, but there's also, I mean, again, it's a crapshoot. There's a lot of brilliant, guys on that, that are conceptually doing something. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of music out here.
Oh, it's scary, man. Yeah, it's scary. It's
And to figure out how to distinguish yourself as a musician, or think you've distinguished yourself as a musician, and then have to deal with the next step, which I'm about to do again. Hey, I made a great record. I think I did something unique. Let's see what happens. And they're like, well, so, you know. So
yeah.
we'll see. So that's a long way of going around. I'm going to try to call the next record Auteur. I better learn how to say it better. Auteur.
Oh,
Um,
sure. With some black and white promo with some French music in the background, not your music, even like oh,
well,
sure. David Weiss, the
yeah,
new
yeah.
record.
Yeah, I mean, look, we as musicians looking at the world we live in, we make up a lot of jokes, and yeah, I mean that was one like 30 years ago. Like, just actually, you know what it was? Maybe it was 20 years ago, and I think it was probably Bob Belden who probably did all that
Mm,
stuff. Just like, you need to play up your Israeli roots, you know, for fuck being a New Yorker, you need to, David, and you got to play that. And I'm like,
yeah.
but he wasn't wrong. He wasn't wrong, you know. And he used to do that. He used to do a thing. I mean, he used to I mean, he was well in. He was in with all the major labels, and he but he had his frustrations too, because
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I I can look, I was next to a lot of these guys, and I can see it, and I mean, and some of it I look at like anything in life. You look at some people you work on, you go like, okay, I'm not going to be that when I'm 50. I'm not going to take that path. I'm not going to get frustrated like that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do this. And Bob's thing was Bob was obviously a talented musician. He was still living in Texas when I was going to North Texas State. So I was
Mm,
like, when I was in college, I was 20, and he still would put together. He had a band, like a quintet, like a Miles-ish kind of thing, and he was playing the baddish shit. He graduated. He was older, but he was. Um, but he had figured out the business to the point where he can talk to. I mean, I used to take a trumpet lesson in New Jersey one day a week. I can't remember what day. And then I would come back in the city and drive down the West Side Highway, and I'd stop at his place, and hang out for the afternoon. Sometime back then, if I was just starting, I was probably like shopping for records for him. When I was shopping for records, he had a list, like, if you see this, pick this up, that kind of shit. And I'd hang in his house all afternoon, and he'd be on sitting at his desk, you know, phone would ring all the time, put it on speakerphone so I could hear like all the bullshit. And any given day, every head of every major label called him. You know, Rick Irv, Bruce Lundvall at Blue Note, they all called him all the time, you know, and a lot of times just asking for advice or shooting the shit or asking his opinion on something. He had, you know, being kind of an easygoing guy, but also a very knowledgeable guy, had found, you know, found a way, or I don't know if he found a way, it just happened to like have the ear of everybody, you know, everybody. And it was a pretty amazing place to be. But the problem was this: they didn't take him seriously as an artist. That's the only reason he did all that, was to be like, okay, now I want to make my record. What? Oh, right, yeah, you play saxophone. Isn't that cute? No, yeah, you know, so, and that was the main source of his frustration, and to a point where, you know, it almost killed him, you know.
Yeah.
But it was, I mean, and he went down some, you know, he went down some paths when he was like pissed off at them and got pissed off. Oh, the guy at Sony, Berkowitz. I mean, those guys, I mean, he was talking to them all the fucking time. He had their ear. He had everything you would dream of to be able to move forward in his music, except to be an artist. You know, and that was the cruel irony of it for him. And I was very conscious of that, you know, very conscious as I moved up, but you wind up doing the same thing. You can't, just because it's a cautionary tale doesn't mean,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of those people were talking to me because of this other thing I did. And then you were like, but hey, you know, I kind of make this, you know, the new jazz composers octet. I made, you know, all this guys, original music, and oh, that's cute. You know. So yeah, I don't know how I got there, but I got a new record out, and we'll see. We'll see. I mean, you know, all you can do is be proud, like proud of the music. You know?
Definitely. Yeah.
When
is it coming out, by the way?
October now, I think.
October. Okay, cool. Fantastic.
Still, like I said, I haven't a lot, you know, had a
Yeah.
lot of setbacks with it, you know. I got a
That's
guy
super.
on an agreement, you know. But that's the music business. That happens more
Yeah.
often in
Yeah,
one
yeah.
case.
Sure.
I've seen things. People keep telling me to write a book, and I was like, it's jazz. Who gives a fuck, you know?
Oh no, come on. You should
I
do
know,
it.
well,
Actually, you have tons of
like,
stories, man.
I can write a book about like what happened to the music industry. No, you know, but it's jazz. Who cares? You know, I don't mean to say it that way, but I guess the only analogy I've always come up with is like the jazz business doing all the sleazy, seedy things that the rock and roll business does, except the rock and roll business does it for $1 million,
Yep.
and people do it for $20.
It's actually
You know?
true. Yep. Yeah.
And that's the difference. I mean, somebody does that to you and it's $1 million, you can kind of go, I mean, you're not going to be happy, but you're going to be like, okay, I get it. $20? Come on, man. Really? $20?
But yeah. Yeah.
See, so I wrote the book. I gave you the analogy in 2 sentences. I mean, that's it in a nutshell.
Basically, yeah. But yeah, it's quite true. Yeah. Amazing,
I
man.
hate to say it. I mean, look, there's a lot of great musicians out here that I'm really happy are doing really well. And in the end, that's the thing. You know, you can go out, you can go to a festival, and you can hear good music.
Yeah.
You know, but what different now than whatever 50 years ago now? What's different now is that there's probably at least 20, 30, 40 guys making records that are making records as good as what's being presented to you as the pinnacle of the art form.
Yeah. Yeah.
When Miles Davis made records, you didn't go like, oh, so and so, he made a record sounds just as good as Kind of Blue, you know, or, you know, in the same ballpark. And now, I mean, again, everybody has different tastes and stuff, and you see that reflected in a lot of polls. Like maybe there's the same 10 or 15 records every year from the same artist that everybody's like, but then like choice, 5 through 10 are like, what? And everybody has their own little favorite, or because there's a lot of stuff out here. I mean, it's a lot of work. I mean, I have friends who are just trying to be fans, and they all say the same thing. Like, I don't know where to start, and that's why the New York Times and things like that were so important for a while. And the New York Times used to review jazz albums. My friend at Tower Records said, 100 people would come in here and buy the CD. That's just this store and this thing. I mean, everybody is looking for someone to tell, they want to like the music. And they're just looking for somebody, some speaker, something to be like that one, and I also have friends who say like, well, I listen to NPR and Kevin Whitehead, and everything he suggests is noise, and I can't listen to it. And it's like, yeah, well, they tend to favor the avant-garde more. It might not call it noise, but I can see how it would not be for you. And I can see how this gets to be counterintuitive. Like all everybody's trying to show you the newest, greatest thing, and it always was left to center, how you can like alienate the few listeners we have. Maybe try something, So I mean, look, it's an interesting world we live in, and it's changing again. New York Times doesn't do interviews, right? I mean, or reviews, as far as I know. I hate to say it, but the only times I really follow that world is when I have a record out. Because all of a sudden I got to read the fucking thing, and then you're like, oh, okay. And it sounds like these days there's less and less places that write about jazz. There's less and less,
it's getting worse, man. But that's how it is. Maybe in Downbeat you'll get like when you have the new record out, you'll be like the artist. No, what is it? The talent deserving wider recognition. I think Billy Hart was last year in that, or someone like that who's like 80 or something.
I can tell you,
that poll. I was like, what the fuck, people? Are you serious?
The Cookers won that a few years ago.
Really?
We were the band deserving wider recognition. And the guy, who's a very nice guy, by the way. There's a lot of nice people in this business, and it doesn't seem to change.
No, sure. Yeah.
But the editor of Downbeat, really sweet guy. I used to do the student awards they give out.
Yeah.
I used to be a judge in those. They would send you a box, and you had to listen to like 100. I mean, I started when they sent me like a big box of cassettes, and now you can do it all digitally at least. But I haven't done it in a few years. But I would judge a certain category every year for like, I don't know, maybe not 20 years, maybe like 16, 17 years or something like that. And one year I was too busy and I couldn't do it. But because you did that, like if you were in town, like you went to a conference, you went to the Gen conference or the IHAE, whatever it is, and you were in town and they were there, they would take you to dinner. They were humane.
Mm-hmm.
They were, I don't know the word. They were good eggs. I mean, they were nice about it. They were civil about the whole thing, So Frank calls me up and says, I don't know how to put this to you, but the Cookers won talent deserving wider recognition. I hope you're not offended, And he said, we look at it. It's not the age of the members of the band. It's the age of the group. You're still, as a group, not that old. And I was like, look, spin it however you want. It's okay. I'm not offended. Whatever, what is it? As long as they spell your name right or something. But every year there's some paradox about that.
Yeah. But yeah. Bizarre.
Better to joke about it having won it than joking about it and not even being on it.
Yeah. It's true.
Yes.
Actually, yeah.
And it's all wrong. I mean, I just saw it was at the Jazz Journalist Awards. They have a different, I don't know what their barometer is for choosing their nominees, but they're like a different number of nominees in each category. And I'm like, I mean, don't we want to be taken seriously as an entity? You
Yeah.
know, shouldn't we still be, I don't know, professional? You know, let's not be the art form that people choose because they couldn't get a job in rock and roll or something. You know, let's come on. You know, and I guess that's always, I mean, in the end, that's the kind of thing, you know, like fuck, you worked hard to do this thing. Can't you guys work a little bit too, you know?
Yeah.
Or, you know, you want to have a conversation with me. Clearly, you know the records and stuff like that, and it's fun to talk to you, but sometimes, you know, you gotta help.
No, no, true. I know, true. Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, the record comes out in October. Let's get back on track. Got a record out. Comes out in October, and it's like I said, sextet.
That's super.
And, you know, try to get some gigs. Try, you know, I've made enough records to know what, you know, a record's supposed
How
to,
it goes. Yeah.
it's supposed, how it's, you know, how to make it sound good and how, you know, how to try to put it out in the world. But again, the world's changed. You know, I'm not, you know, I don't want to be like this old, like, how do you make, you know, how do you do this now? Get some kid and get get more Instagram fans, or I mean,
Man, that's, yeah. I don't know. It's, I don't even want to go there. That's scary. You should do like, you know, those 20-second solo licks
yeah, I can't.
and post them every day or something. It's terrible.
Yeah,
But,
but people do
but
that. I
people
think
do
that used
that,
to
yeah.
get the people thing that used to get me is kids posting like, here's my gig, you know, post something from their gig. They're fucking up the head. You know, they missed it. I was like,
Yeah.
I understand that ultimately it doesn't matter, but the producer in me all the time just wants to keep the standard high. And that's just really a way of just, you know, it doesn't matter. I mean, I've had that conversation with people because, you know, we talk about like producing records. We talk about like the studios and engineering. I mean, we talk amongst ourselves about like how do we do this? And I remember talking to somebody like, you know, well, you know, I was talking to so and so, and they said this, you know, they were about to make a record for the same label, and I said there was this, you know, so and so just did it. He had this issue, maybe you look out for this, or maybe. And he basically looked at me and said, "Look, I don't give a fuck, you know. I just knocking another one out. Just keep them coming. Just keep them coming, keep them coming, keep them coming."
Mm.
And you know, and he, I played in his big band, and he approached it the same way. Oh, like, can we rehearse this part? You know, and it doesn't seem to make a difference. It doesn't mean we change, but you just, you know, this world, it's just
Mm.
put it out there. Content, look, you know, and you're like, that's the wrong note, you know. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You know, I mean, I don't know how to, you know, it always comes back to the Cookers and those guys' work ethic and every way they, and
Yeah.
I can't, I mean, the music I produce might hopefully be more uniquely mine than what they do or whatever, but the whole approach to it is hasn't changed.
Yeah.
No, nobody has shown me anything about like doing this music that's like, oh, okay, because it all seems to involve shortcuts, you know,
Yeah.
and you know at this point, fuck it, you know, if it takes me 10 years to make a record, you know, fuck it. I mean, it's the beauty of it is though, you know, Blue Note Records is not like, no, you got to put out a record next year. You got to we're hot, baby. We're hot, baby. Get the next one out, you know. I mean, the one time that was kind of a thing 10 years ago when I
Yeah.
was on Otema, the beauty of it was like, you signed me. You here, okay, you did the Cookers. Here's the Sextet record. Okay, not a Cooker record. Okay, here's the next Cookers record. And it was like Point of Departure, and oh no, we don't want to do that one. Okay, so that's why Point of Departure wound up on Rope-a-Dope.
Yeah.
But with that cycle, you can kind of keep it going. When Point of Departure kind of ran out of steam, um, then that's why you have now, and you asked me what my last record was. I think Point of Departure was 2017,
Yeah.
and all seven years ago now. Maybe it was 2016. I don't remember. No, I think 2017. And maybe there's been a Cookers record since then, and then there's COVID, and, you know, here we are. But this just seems to happen a lot lately. We had a Cookers record in the can too, and that label kind of, they didn't fold, but they slowed down, you know. Talk about we need investors, and I was like, don't you sell records to make, I mean, you make the record, then you sell the record, then you make the next record. Investors, that doesn't sound like a business model to me, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Unless it's a scam, like, okay, yeah, I mean, if you're an independent label and you sell this amount of records, that keeps your small thing going, but somehow you're not doing it, you're doing it for the love, but you also want a salary.
Mm.
You know, a bigger salary because you got kids, or you know, people got responsibilities. You know, a lot of independent labels are guys who made their money elsewhere and love jazz enough to do this thing.
Yep.
But maybe, you know, in the world we live in now with Kickstarter and all this other bullshit, you can get an investor to like kind of pay your salary and make your, I don't know. I mean, it's
Yeah,
maybe we did the Cookers did a live record. We would been dying to do a live record for a long time. And we did one at Dizzy's at Jazz at Lincoln Center, and had the label and everything. And now it's just another one.
Yeah.
You know. So anyway, what else you got? It's been what was it, 3 o'clock? Oh, that's not terrible.
Yeah, but no, I mean, yeah.
The Sextet, that record's coming out.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to that, man. So.
It's a little early yet. It's only April, but in a couple
but
months, I'll learn to talk about it all the time.
No.
Auteur.
Auto, yes. Fantastic, man.
The idea again is, like I said, new jazz composers octet, the sextet, the Cookers, Point of Departure. You know, if you look at them as movies, they have the same director, and you could see the style. You know, they all sound differently, but they all hopefully have a common thread of something. You know.
Yeah. Beautiful. Fantastic, man.